Good morning. My name is Kathy Finch, and I'm your worship associate today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills. Whether you have been with this church a decade or more, or this is your first time visiting, we welcome you. Whatever the faith and traditions of your past, we welcome you. Whatever your theological stance, we welcome you. Whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, whatever your journey has been, we welcome you. Newcomers and guests are always welcome to participate in any of our church activities. If you'd like more information about our church or Unitarian Universalism, please talk to our minister, Reverend Jane Thickstun. You can find her contact information on our website. Please join us for coffee hour following the service. The Zoom link will be posted in the YouTube chat at the end of the service. We will be breaking into small groups for better conversation. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills. It is good to be together, even virtually.
Welcome, everybody. The words of my colleague and good friend, Cynthia Landrum. Spirit of life and love, we gather together in different ways this morning. From computer screens, from telephones, we gather reaching out across the wires, checking in on the chat. We come together in religious community. From living room to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other and to the world, ready to build the community of hope and love as we face this bright morning. We are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hope, and our prayers in service to one another and to this world. Come, let us worship together.
We light our chalice this morning with words from Laura Thompson. Across the distance, the light from within me shines, sending love to all. Across the distance, your light is fuel that warms me and helps to keep my own light burning. Together, we keep the flame of community burning bright. Would you please join now in singing hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. The words will appear on your screen.
We sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us, and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We're thrilled to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories that we shared with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within us is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see
So I'm going to tell you a story. This is one of my favorite stories for Time for All Ages, and it's by another friend and colleague, Reverend Christopher Bice. And it's called God's Hat. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through the center of town. One day, something strange happened. God walked down the road, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe, and on top of her head there was this wonderful hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared in the distance. "Boy, God sure was beautiful," one man said. "And what a beautiful blue hat she had on." "Yes, God was beautiful," said a woman from the other side of the street. "But it wasn't a blue hat she was wearing. It was a red hat." "You are wrong," said the man. "It was definitely a blue hat." "No, you are wrong," said the woman. "It was definitely a red hat." As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. All the people on the other side of the road were certain that God was wearing a red hat. People got mad and started screaming at each other. Finally, the people got so angry that they decided to build a wall that went straight down the center of town. From that point on, the people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to one another. On one side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a blue hat. On the other side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a red hat. Many years passed, and the people were still enemies. Then one day, God came walking back through the village. She was smiling and bouncing on top of the wall that the people had built many years ago. This time, she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man, "the people on that side of the street say that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat. But we know better. We know that you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment, began to scratch her head and thought, "I think I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God. "And on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and red on the other." And saying nothing more, God continued walking down the wall until she disappeared off in the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing. Then another child started laughing, and another. Soon the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been. As the sound of laughter grew louder and louder, the wall began to shake and crumble until finally it came tumbling down to the ground. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down the wall between a divided and foolish people.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Richards from the Lay Pastoral Care Team. During our service, we create this sacred space for sharing within our community. It is a time to share significant life passages with the congregation so that you can be held in loving care. I'll be reading the joys and sorrows this morning. We will also be placing a stone, which represents each joy or sorrow, in the sand. The sand represents our congregation, supporting our sorrows and lifting up our joys. Today, we have 3 sorrows. First, Connie Hester shared her sorrow that Hazel Ann McLean's mother has passed away after a short illness. To Connie and Hazel Ann and family, we say, we're holding you in our hearts. Bruce Travers also has a sorrow. I have learned that my 79-year-old mother has tested positive for COVID-19. Luckily, she is not currently showing any symptoms, but unfortunately, she has been even more isolated, which is not good for her condition. To Bruce and his family, we say, we're holding you in our hearts. From Don Fitzgerald Swidell, Bill and I have lost a friend to cancer. Baron Remus Fletcher, mundanely known as Ron Schwogel, was a dedicated SCA Barony program musician. His knowledge of music and his collection of medieval recorders were both amazing, but even combined were smaller than his big, kind heart. To Don and Bill we say, we're holding you in our hearts. We now place one more stone in the sand for all the joys and sorrows that exist in our hearts, but which remain unspoken today. We especially think of all who are affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. Please read with me the words appearing on the screen, knowing that here includes all those watching. Let us hold in our circle of caring each person here. Let us hold in our hearts those who are unable to be with us today. Let us hold in our memories those who have moved on. Let us find comfort in knowing that we are not alone.
I invite you now to join me in a spirit of meditation or prayer. So please settle in a little more comfortably and close your eyes if you wish. Allow your body to just relax. Your space is sacred. Breathe. Breathe in deeply. And breathe out slowly. Breathing in compassion. And breathing out peace. I share with you these words of Ernest Pipes. In this quiet moment, we seek our higher self, the person we would become, more patient and forbearing, more forgiving, more compassionate, more understanding, more courageous before the wrongs that must be righted. Here, may we acknowledge our debt to those good individuals and groups from whom we have received benefits. Here, may we be moved to revere the ideals of love and mercy. Here, let us hold a mirror to our lives that we may acknowledge our failures and mercifully forgive ourselves. Here, let us leave some of our burdens and hurts, our feelings of unworthiness, our grudges. With us here, may the lonely find friends, the defeated be encouraged, and those struggling with temptation be reminded of their loyalty. And in the warmth of this community, even while we're virtual, may each find a need supplied. So would we dwell together in peace, seek the truth in love, and be of help to one another. Let us pause for a few moments of silent reflection.
Today's reading is from an article, actually a long book review, in Christian Century called American Heresies by Lauren Winner. The book being reviewed is The Gospel According to America by David Dark. Dark illustrates neighborliness by way of a scene at his local Waffle House. There, a motley crew makes conversation, quote, sitting and talking over food and drink in a boisterous public place. What could be more exciting or egalitarian? No appeal to the court of fact has more resonance than another. Everybody has to let everybody else finish speaking, and nobody is allowed to talk too terribly loud because people are trying to eat in peace. You're welcome to bring the Bible or the president into it, but if you don't keep your ego at a reasonable volume, you can take your conversation elsewhere. Those who make an appeal to religion had better be ready to explain themselves humbly and carefully. Good fellowship requires good-natured self-deprecation in all our testimonials, end quote. What are the fruits of this Waffle House conversationalism? Insofar as, quote, they'll see each other again the next day, the regulars might find it hard to assert that the token liberal among them doesn't believe in family values, or that the resident conservative hates poor people, end quote. It is not more civility that we need, though civility is a fine thing, but more particularly, knowledge of one another. More, dare we say it, love?
I have a bumper sticker on my car. I was blessed with many gifts from the congregation on my first day, which was also my birthday. One of these gifts was a bumper sticker with a picture of Mr. Rogers, and it says, "We are all neighbors." I've never put a bumper sticker on my car before, but I'm proud to display this one. In an article from August 2019 about Mr. Rogers, the Reverend Candace McKibben says, "I think of how we can incorporate the simple but profound wisdom of Fred Rogers into the current crisis we face in repairing our immigration system and repairing our soul as a nation. Maintaining neighborliness in all that we do would be a good start. May we find the grace and will to be neighborly." I have some great neighbors on my little block in Bellevue. My next door neighbor has helped me take down small trees, replaced my outdoor faucet, lent me yard tools, and more. And he has a small swimming pool he lets me use in the summer. It's like my own private little swimming pool. The neighbors across the street welcomed me right away to the neighborhood the day I moved in, and have helped me carry a heavy item to my third floor and gave me candy to hand out on Halloween when my inadequate supply ran out, when the demand was at its heaviest and I couldn't see running to the store because I'd miss all the trick-or-treaters. On Wednesday, this past Wednesday, I caught a neighbor from down the street shoveling my sidewalk up to the steps of my porch. I am lucky to have such good neighbors. It's easy to like my neighbors, and I'm glad I live near them and have relationships with them. It's not always so easy, however, to like our neighbors and behave well towards them. And I don't dare talk politics with my neighbors. In this strongly polarized political climate we're in, that just seems to get worse and worse all the time, it can be hard to talk to acquaintances in the grocery store or on Facebook. How do we talk to each other about anything beyond the weather? The classic story about what it means to be a good neighbor is the story of the Good Samaritan. As a prelude to the story, Jesus affirms that the way to a good life is to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and that you should love your neighbor as yourself. He is then asked, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replies, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." That's from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. In the story of the Good Samaritan, the fact that it was a Samaritan offering help to a Jew takes on much more significance when we know the relationship these two ancient peoples had to each other. They were once part of the same family, united under the leadership of the great kings, David and Solomon. On Solomon's death, however, the kingdom was divided into the tribes of the northern kingdom and the tribes of the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was Judah. Judah contained Jerusalem and the house of David and had a more secure monarchy. But Israel was larger and more prosperous. A real animosity developed, such as can only develop between people who were once close. By the time of Jesus, much later, the northerners were called Samaritans, after the major city of Samaria. The Jews were people from the southern kingdom of Judah. Both claimed to be the true descendants of the nation of Israel. By New Testament times, they were so divided that the Gospel of John says that Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. That's John chapter 4, verse 9. So Jews and Samaritans were arch enemies. And yet it was the Samaritan who tended to the Jew, not the priest or the Levite, members of the Jewish religious elite. These men had no time or inclination to help one of their own in need, but someone who might be considered an enemy found within himself the compassion and generosity to take care of this stranger, even sparing no expense. In America today, we can see examples of such compassion and generosity when disaster strikes. The outpouring of help was quite impressive in response to hurricanes, going back to Katrina, Sandy and Irene, Harvey, Irma, and Maria. And we don't only help out when disasters affect our American neighbors, but for situations abroad as well. Think back to the tsunami in Japan, if you can remember that, the earthquake in Haiti, the typhoon in the Philippines. All of these disasters I remember an outpouring of help for. And the UUA converted so that they now have simply a disaster relief fund instead of setting up a new fund to help with each new disaster. And it's not just Unitarian Universalists, but Americans in general who give help when nature does damage. We can be good neighbors in such circumstances. I read something, though, that suggested that our generosity is increasingly being tied to the perception of the sufferers being innocent victims. People give for victims of natural disasters, but they've lost interest in chronic problems such as poverty, which is sometimes seen as self-inflicted suffering. Who is our neighbor? Our neighbors are those unfortunate victims of Katrina's wrath. But our neighbors also the woman at the shelter whose husband beat her. Our neighbor is the young man who has ended up in jail because he never learned proper ways to handle conflict. Our neighbor is the homeless person asking for change. Our neighbor is the family member we haven't spoken to in years who is now dying of cancer or COVID. Our neighbor is the colleague at work who is sabotaging everything we're trying to accomplish. Our neighbor is the writer of a letter to the editor of the local newspaper who ridiculed some firmly held belief of ours. Our neighbor is the supporter of politicians who are challenging our most deeply held values and seemingly destroying the structures we've built to defend those values. Some of these neighbors may seem harder to love than others. Jesus says the way to a good life is to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. The problem is, most of us don't love ourselves very much. I believe that's where the first part can help. Loving God can be thought of as a theistic way of saying loving our own better nature. Loving that part of ourselves that is divine and that remains the core of our being. Loving that essence that is us, no matter how much we mess up, how badly we behave, how much we hurt others, no matter how much we block our connection to our deeper selves through addictions or other means. That divine spark is still within each of us, no matter what we do, and that makes us worthy of love. We need to love ourselves. That tender, caring, creative, beautiful, magnificent divinity within each and every one of us. And we need to love it with all our heart, all of our soul, all our strength, and all our mind. I believe if we can do that, then loving our neighbor comes easily. Once there was a very old and wise man. Every day he would sit outside a gas station in his rocking chair and wait to greet motorists as they passed through his small town. On this day, his granddaughter knelt down at the foot of his chair and slowly passed the time with him. As they sat and watched the people come and go, a tall man who surely had to be a tourist, since they knew everyone in town, began looking around as if he were checking out the area for a place to live. The stranger walked up and asked, "So, what kind of town is this that we're in?" The older gentleman slowly turned to the man and replied, "Well, what kind of town are you from?" The tourist said, "In the town I'm from, everyone is really critical of each other. The neighbors all gossip about everyone, and it's a real negative place to live. I'm sure glad to be leaving. It's not a very cheerful place." The man in the chair looked at the stranger and said, "You know, that's just how this town is." An hour or so later, a family that was also passing through stopped for gas. The car slowly turned in and rolled to a stop in front of where the older gentleman and his granddaughter were sitting. The mother jumped out with 2 children and asked where the restrooms were. The man in the chair pointed to a small, bent-up sign that was barely hanging by one nail on the side of the door. The father stepped out of the car and also asked the man, "Is this town a pretty good place to live?" The man in the chair replied, "What about the town you are from? How is it?" And the father looked at him and said, "Well, in the town I'm from, everyone is very close and always willing to lend their neighbor a helping hand. There's always a hello and thank you everywhere you go. I really hate to leave. I feel almost like we are leaving family." The older gentleman turned to the father and gave him a warm smile. "You know, that's a lot like this small town." Then the family returned to the car, said their thank yous, waved goodbye, and drove away. After the family was in the distance, the granddaughter looked up at her grandfather and asked, "Grandpa, how come when the first man came into our town, you told him it was a terrible place to live? And when the family came to town, you told them it was a wonderful place to live?" The grandfather lovingly looked down at his granddaughter's wandering blue eyes and said, "No matter where you move, you take your own attitude with you, and that's what makes it terrible or wonderful." Of course, it can be harder to see the divine in some people than in others. Some people may see the world so differently from how we see it that they may seem downright dangerous to us. And I'm thinking not only politicians, but the people who elect them. We have red states and blue states, and within each state we have people who see God's hat as red and people who see it as blue. We are building up walls between us and ceasing to speak to one another, just like in the story. We need to oppose actions and behaviors we believe are harmful. We need to do everything we can to reduce harm and protect the vulnerable. But we also need to find a way to talk to our neighbors about the very things that divide us without animosity or hostility. President Obama once said, "Some may be more to blame than others for the current political climate, but all of us are responsible for reversing it." Sometimes it's hard to see the good in others because we feel threatened and our fear takes over. Fear is the opposite of love. Fear is what keeps us from being the trusting, loving creatures we were born to be. The more we let our fear rule us, the less we are able to speak and behave in a loving manner. These are real fears I have. And while it's perfectly okay and natural to be afraid, when I speak from my fears, I am not speaking lovingly. When I speak from my fear, I can say things I regret later. It is possible for me to address issues that make me fearful without bad-mouthing anyone. In fact, I've gotten upset with Stephen Colbert lately because I see him too often going over the edge of decency. I believe it's hitting below the belt when we attack someone's physical appearance or call them names. If we treat others that way, we're just adding to the problem, and we invite retaliation. Mr. Rogers would not do that. What I need to do to act in a loving manner to my neighbors is to seek to understand them. This doesn't mean agreeing with them or letting them have their way, but my fears can be stilled somewhat maybe by finding understanding of those who think differently. Once we know our neighbors, even people who are different, who have different needs or think differently, once we know them and are in relationship with them, they become less intimidating, less foreign, more understandable. A former congregant in my parents' generation once told me how he came to accept gay people. He used to attend the UU camp in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where he got to know Keith Cron before Keith was a minister and the UUA's ministerial transitions director. It was through knowing Keith, he said, that he realized gay people are all right. When we know a person, it's harder to demonize them, harder to polarize our views on an issue and to believe in our own absolute rightness. Knowing people's stories helps us to understand them. At the Waffle House in the reading, there are a bunch of guys who come from different walks of life, have different opinions and different needs. Yet, because they see each other nearly every day in a public place, they've established certain standards for how they'll speak to each other. They don't talk too loudly, they don't interrupt, they don't attack each other verbally. They bring humility and goodwill to the conversation. They can overcome their fear of liberals or conservatives or what have you, because here is one right in front of them. It's just good old Joe. They can overcome their fears by being in relationship with their neighbors And they can be in relationship because they have overcome their fears. It goes both ways. Fear is a natural and useful emotion. It tells us when we are in danger so that we can protect ourselves. But because we all experienced some wounding in childhood and developed fears and protective behavior around those wounds, we experience a lot of fear that doesn't serve us well, and in fact hinders us from being the whole, open, and loving people we wish to be. Fear can be overcome by love. The more we love ourselves, the more we can recognize that divine core within ourselves. The more we can see it in others, the more we can love others and recognize that divine core in them. Seeing that we are wonderful, beautiful, loving, and beloved, which we all are, gives us a sense of peace and trust that everything is at bottom okay. If we can approach others with the confidence that we are a lovable person, then we can deal with them without fear, without animosity. We can speak to them with respect and indeed with love. May we all feel that confidence that we are lovable. May we love the God within with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And may we reflect that love for ourselves and the love that we show to our neighbor. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. And let's sing together number 108 in the Teal Hymn Book, if you happen to have it. The words will be on your screen. It's called When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed by love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space,
Unitarian Universalist congregation, with its message of radical inclusivity, is a beacon of hope to all who are oppressed and all who are their allies. This community needs your support if it is to continue to be a force for good in a deeply troubled world. The morning offering will be taken by your mailing a check to the church or going to the uucnh.org website, finding the link in the upper right-hand corner that says Donate, and making a contribution equivalent to what you would be putting in the plate, or more. May these gifts and the work of our hands and hearts give power to all we stand for as a community of faith.
In closing, I offer these favorite words of mine from Fred Gillis. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Amen. Join us for coffee hour. Go in peace.